Obviously, the extension, the richest player in NFL history, is no longer Jalen Hurts. It will be Justin Herbert for the day. It's Lamar Jackson. Your reaction to the extension with the Ravens?
Not surprising. As soon as the Jalen Hurts extension went down, my first thought was Baltimore needs to go back and up the ante now, because for a team that was using the leverage of the non-exclusive franchise tag to kind of keep other teams at bay, to sort of suppress the market the way that tag works at, you wanted to avoid that $230 million that, whether it was fully guaranteed or just the amount of guaranteed money, seemed to be the sticking point for their negotiation with Lamar Jackson. The best way to do that, beef it up relative to the offer that we heard reported for Lamar Jackson back early in the fall. Give him the satisfaction of being the highest paid, now just $5 million about over Jalen Hurts' contract, and then go forward and prosper. 5 years for the Baltimore Ravens. We'll see when the guaranteed money runs out on this, but all in all, everyone can feel good about this, and Lamar Jackson getting to break the news himself on the Ravens account seems like a great way to meet halfway and really show the unity going forward for two sides that seemed at war for a long time.
You brought up some really good points there in terms of the Lamar re-signing. Let's go to the NFL draft now. You've got a ton of quarterback talk going on. Let's assume Bryce Young goes to Carolina. Are you taking C.J. Stroud number 2 if you're the Houston Texans? If not, where would you go?
I am taking him number 2 if I'm the Texans. I feel like you're trying to right the ship there. You've made changes. You brought D'Amico Ryans in. You're the darling of the offseason for a move. You got one of those hot market coaches that everyone was clamoring for. Now you got to answer the most important question in pro sports. That 2-quarterback system with Davis Mills and company last year got you just out of that number 1 pick. And so you want to answer that question before you go forward. If not, and if they opt away from that, I feel like that Tyree Wilson smoke has got to mean there's some fire there. When you hear the people that it's been coming from, it tends to be words that I trust. And so to see that upset, not only not going a quarterback, but this idea that Will Anderson Jr., who's been the consensus top prospect for the longest, could now be supplanted as the top edge rusher in the draft, would be an insane turn to night 1 starting off at pick 2.
Mike Golic Jr., Gojo Show, of course, DraftKings host the special tonight, DraftKings Draft Special, YouTube and Twitter. Make sure you check it out. I know you've talked about this on the Gojo Show, but do it for us here. Rank the quarterbacks for me, Mike.
Yeah, I'd look at the top of the draft, and I would obviously go the order we've taken them. Bryce Young and then C.J. Stroud, 1 and 2. I think as we've seen draft season go along, and this has been for me too, I've settled a little more on the idea of the risk of Bryce Young size-wide versus the reward of what we know him to be as a player, what we've seen him do at that size against high-level competition, and deciding that's worth it. C.J. Stroud, extremely accurate. We've seen mobility in critical moments and has more prototypical NFL size. From there, I'd go Anthony Richardson. And with the Anthony Richardson-Will Levis debate, you've got two guys that on the surface were given that label of raw prospect a bit, right? Tons of traits, great ability, live arms, big bodies. Will Levis is jacked as all get off. But I would separate Anthony Richardson by saying, one, he's a guy who you can really mold. Only 12 starts under his belt, not a lot of football, but already does a lot of things that are far more clean inside the pocket, clean naturally, than I think he gets credit for with that label of raw. Moves around and buys time in the pocket really well, takes hits, escapes pressure but keeps his eyes downfield, and obviously has all that big playability loaded up inside him. And then for Will Levis at the 4 spot, I think what we're seeing has been part of the appeal with him has been, hey, he played in NFL offenses at Kentucky. He had Liam Cohen as his coordinator when he had the most success in 21, and he has the Josh Allen syndrome of all his weapons left after that 2021 season. You had Chris Rodriguez at running back suspended for the first half of the 2022 year. Wan'Dale Robinson gone. Guys lost on the offensive line. He looked like a man out there on an island at times, trying to do a little bit too much. But I still think there's going to be NFL teams that look at all that ability and some of the production they've seen in NFL familiar schemes and say that's a guy worthy of going high in the first round.
For people that are unaware, Mike played guard at Notre Dame. Mike, when you look at the offensive linemen, Peter Skronsky out of Northwestern, Paris Johnson out of Ohio State, and then Darnell Wright out of Tennessee, which one of these three would you prefer if you're a GM taking the first tackle?
Yeah, so if I'm taking the first tackle, and I'm looking for a pure tackle, especially on the left side, Paris Johnson's really intriguing. I think you have a guy that reminds me a lot of Tyler Smith, who we got last year out of Tulsa, who ended up being one of the top picks for the Dallas Cowboys and kicking out and starting for them when Tyron Smith went down early in that season. extremely high motor, great natural body angles. He's a good, Mike Mayock used to say it all the time. He's a knee bender, not a waist bender. He gets his hands inside and finishes guys. And with him, we know elite arm length, what everyone loves to tackle. He doesn't use it right now. Guys get into his chest, guys get into his body. So if you're confident in your ability to coach him up and you believe you can add that to what is already a pretty enticing package, you've got the makings of a guy who can be all pro type ceiling, even if I don't know technically if he's there yet. I think Skoronski is probably the safest pick, and he awards you some position versatility. He's the one I think be able to kick down to guard and do it pretty seamlessly, operate with a little bit less space, clean prospect, good enough change of direction, really solid hand play to overcome some of the limitations with arm length that we know popped up after the combine memberships, and just in general, a guy that we saw rock solid in every aspect, run, pass, and scheme versatile like we saw him use at Northwestern time and time again. So I think I would order him that way. Darnell Wright, though, my favorite guy of this group. So much fun to watch. And I think in an offense that slows down the pace a little bit, remember at Tennessee, they're going a mile a minute. Some of his issues, getting caught on his toes, getting a bad base, those get erased when you're running between 60 and 80 plays a game as opposed to getting up near 90 plays a game.
Mike, you may be biased here, but let's go tight end. Meagher, Notre Dame connection, or Kincaid?
Yeah, I'm going to remove bias here as best I can and say Michael Mayer. Now, Dalton Kincaid's an excellent prospect. And I can understand why people get hot and bothered by him. Great wiggle in the open field, really dynamic as a receiver, and seeing some of that separation that showed up on tape in an offense at Utah that we know under Andy Ludwig wanted to make use of multiple tight ends. You had the injury to Brent Keithy early on, and Kincaid really stepped up and carried the mantle there. But you look at what Michael Mayer affords you not only as a pass catcher, and for my money, he's the best contested catch maker in this draft, regardless of position. What he did in traffic at Notre Dame, especially this last year, where he was really the only consistent, reliable target on that offense, was exemplary, even if some of the top-end testing numbers aren't quite there for people. And he's a blocker that's steadily gotten better throughout his career. Being a tight end that can do both matters to him. He's not just the guy that you can have as an H in the backfield. He can be your Y guy. He can get up on the line of scrimmage and really do damage and stay on the field for more snaps and give your offense that optionality that I think we see right now is extremely valuable, maybe as valuable as it's been in a while for tight ends in the National Football League.
Quote of the day, I can see why they're getting hot and bothered for Dalton Kincaid. I can tell you, you're going to be hot and bothered by the DraftKings coverage of the draft tonight. We've got the VSiN and DraftKings coverage over at DraftKings YouTube and Twitter. Mike Golic Jr., of course, the Gojo Show, wildly popular. It's an awesome show. Thank you for getting in the building, and thank you for giving us the time. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.